Hello everyone. Hello Dr. Laitman. We're continuing our series of shows on the study of the Ten Sefirot. It's our fourth lesson. As we said before about Baal HaSulam, he wrote the study of the Ten Sefirot as a textbook for beginners. So I heard from you, meaning besides the original text and the commentaries to the Book of the Tree of Life, he wrote several clarifications, which are called Inner Light and Inner Observation. And after that, he wrote questions and answers to help understand the definition of the word, to clarify it, and also different spiritual actions. The clarification of different spiritual actions. What can you add to this? Are there any other such compositions that are similar to the study of the Ten Sefirot? Because it seems like all other books are written in a completely different manner. True. It is a very unique kind of book, according to the Book of the Ari, the Tree of Life, where there is a full commentary, and you can't add or subtract anything to it. These 6 volumes are really the complete layout of what the Ari wanted to say, explanation of what he wanted to say in his book, The Tree of Life. So Baal HaSulam, he really showed how deeply he truly understands the Ari, and that he is his successor. It is considered to be that the soul of the Ari incarnated in Baal HaSulam as well. I'd like to ask more about the external form. Was it the character of Baal HaSulam to write such a Kabbalistic work in that specific form? Because really it's like a university textbook. Or this is what he wanted for it to be? Well, first of all, he wanted for it to really be closer to a textbook, because he already wrote for our generation. This is A. B. It's because, nonetheless, he wouldn't have been able to express himself in such a precise manner, explaining what the Ari wanted to say about the way in which the desire is born, that is governed, the desire which is governed by the light, that can correctly respond to the light, and by way of cause and consequence to come to full equivalence of form, similarity with the light. So really, the study of the Ten Sefirot, the book itself, I think that it contains the full accumulation of actions of the desire in relation to the light. Last question in this regard, from what I know, when he wrote this book, the original, it was written as 2 long parallel columns on each page, in order for a person to be able to grasp the entire information all at once. He liked long columns even when he wrote for himself. So the page is divided into 2 columns where you read at first, and this narrow kind of text. What is it for? In order to be able to grasp in one glance, without moving your eyes, without moving your head, to be able to see the entire sentence and grasp it from beginning to end. So we've completed the first and second parts, and now there is a clarification called Inner Observation. It's very special. We said that inner light is something more particular, and inner observation is a more general explanation. And Baal HaSulam writes, first, we must know that when dealing with spiritual matters which have no concern with time, space, or motion, and moreover, when dealing with godliness, we do not have the words by which to contemplate and express our entire vocabulary is taken from sensations of imaginary senses. And then he gives an example. Suppose light. There's the light of the sun, and there's the light of my life. When you feel enlightened, for example, and these are completely different things, all the more if we're talking about spiritual aspects or concepts. And furthermore, he says that the Kabbalists have chosen a special language for this, called the language of the branches, if you could explain. It is a special language used by Kabbalists that on the one hand is taken from our world, and on the other hand, these are sensations taken from the upper world. And so what turns out is that when Kabbalists speak the language of our world, what they mean, what they wish to describe, are certain phenomena in the spiritual world, in the upper world, which is actually impossible. But as a person gradually studies over an extended period of time that he dedicates to it, wishing to attain the true spiritual laws and actions, then by it, he brings the upper light closer to himself, because this is how it's embedded in the text itself already by the author. And therefore, a person gradually starts coming closer to the inner meaning of the text. And thus, he gradually overcomes the barrier that is actually unbridgeable, existing between our world and the spiritual one, and through the words of our world starts to understand spiritual actions. Can you give some example, maybe? For example, can you take a spiritual root and its branch in our world? Well, this is what Baal HaSulam did in his composition of the Ten Sefirot, in his work. He's giving us a dictionary of words, Kabbalistic terms, and brings their explanation that's close to our understandings in this world, but still it is not our world. Light, darkness, nearing, moving away, restriction. He tries to explain to us all the actions of the spiritual world with the help of different explanations, that by studying them we draw upon ourselves the reforming light, the surrounding light. We don't know what it's about, but by it we awaken the upper light that works on us and that brings us closer to sense the actions of this upper light. Okay, so this is what he practically writes about here. He says, Baal HaSulam writes, that should appease your mind regarding the perplexing expressions we often find in books of Kabbalah, and some that are even foreign to the human spirit. And then he gives examples or concepts like kiss, embrace, coupling, and other words that are as if inappropriate, but they actually mean or talk about the connection between spiritual objects. And in our world, he says that we necessarily need to use these words because there's a direct correspondence between the root and branch, and that you can't replace it by any other word. So the question is, what if a Kabbalist was wrong? Might it be that he named the branch by the wrong root, for example? Well, if he uses it constantly, and it's a real Kabbalist, we accept it as a given. And if, for example, he might have been mistaken, then it is unclear what does his mistake come from, because then it means that he doesn't exactly understand what goes on in the spiritual world, and therefore doesn't see the correct results in our world, meaning his language of the branches is incorrect. And if he's a real Kabbalist that attains the upper actions and their results, corresponding results in our world, then he can't choose any other words, no matter how strange they might be. So if a Kabbalist is in spiritual attainment and he attains a certain root of a spiritual object, then he clearly sees the branch in our world. Yes, and can't use any other word. It's like Baal HaSulam wrote someplace, why is the Mount of Olives called the Mount of Olives? Yeah. That's what they felt, that this is the name that should be given to it. Or he says Adam. Why was Adam called Adam in the Torah? Right, meaning all the words that stem from Kabbalah, and this practically all the words of the Torah, they come from the Kabbalist's attainment, stem from there. So this is clear, and the Torah is really written in the language of branches. When we talk about Egypt, then in our world there's a place called Egypt, and in the Torah what it means, of course, Mitzrayim is Mitzra, consists of the words Mitzra, which means the essence of evil. A Kabbalist feels the evil of his egoistic ways, and corresponding to that there is this place in our world called Egypt. That's clear, but when he names such concepts, terms like Keter, Chokhmah, Binah, Zeranpin in our world, there is no expression to these words, implementations, manifestations, where partially there is. Keter, Chokhmah, and Binah in our world, there are such words, even though that we use them in a completely different context and key, etc. But there are such that are not used in our world, that Kabbalists found themselves out of their spiritual attainment. So there are spiritual objects that do not manifest in our world, do not appear in our world, are not expressed in our world. True. And there are spiritual objects that are expressed in our world. We see the branch and we can name it. And if not, then there are all these names like the Ten Sefirot. Well, it's not something that they invented or anything. It's because they felt that precisely these desires, or this desire, like you said, about the Mount of Olives, They named it that way because they saw that it's precisely fit for planting olive trees. And other words as well. So, a person in Kabbalah cannot research what he has not attained. Of course not. How can he research something without its attainment? In no way. Further, writes Baal HaSulam, this is what I have troubled to do in this interpretation, in the inner observation that we're reading now, to explain the Ten Sefirot as the godly sage, the Ari, had instructed us in their spiritual purity, devoid of any tangible terms. Thus, any beginner may approach the wisdom without failing in any materialization or mistake. With the understanding of these 10 Sefirot, one will also come to examine and know how to comprehend the rest of the issues in this wisdom. So if I correctly understand, he says here that this language was, the language of the Sefirot was precisely used in order not to materialize things, because if, for example, I hear Egypt, then immediately I imagine some place that I went on vacation in Egypt. But if you say Zeranpin, I can't imagine anything. I can't materialize these objects. Well, gradually, studying the Kabbalistic texts, you will start understanding in the different words of our world, spiritual actions and concepts. Further, writes Baal HaSulam that he recommends for beginners to study in the language of Kabbalah and not in the language of branches in which the books of previous generations are written, in order not to get confused by the different stories. Yes, the thing is that Kabbalists, even those who attained the upper world and understood more or less what does Kabbalah speak about and the inner meaning of it, they could nonetheless not express anything explicitly because they were lacking the language. And precisely Baal HaSulam, he revealed this language and its correct implementation, and therefore, after him, we can already be certain that we will not err and that we will interpret everything and understand everything correctly. Further, writes Baal HaSulam, know that there is not an essence of a single being in the world, both the ones perceived by our senses and the ones perceived by our mind's eye, that is not included in the Creator. Meaning everything in our world is included in the Creator. What does it mean? Well, the Creator is the general force that includes everything in it. Meaning all the evil that we see, it's what we see, but actually everything that occurs, everything that happens, everything that is, that exists, it is all included in the Creator. Well, it's said about the Creator that He is the quality of bestowal, etc. Our world is egoistic, and still it's in Him. How's that? Because we grasp it incorrectly. But actually, so does this evil exist in the Creator, or we simply grasp it this way? This is how we perceive it. There is no evil in the world altogether. So it's our perception. Further, writes Baal HaSulam, he explains concepts like one, unique and unified. He says that one indicates a single evenness. What does it mean? That the Creator is one, and that there is no other force, that this force is unique, that there is nothing else besides it, and unified, because everything that we perceive it maybe as completely contradicting and opposite qualities. They all come from Him. He writes about unified, shows that although He performs the multiple operations, one force performs all these. Right. Even though that in our qualities, sensations, this force is expressed maybe as many contradicting forces. So again, this only in our perception. Only. Everything that we see, all the contradicting things, etc., etc., it is because this is how we differentiate everything that happens. Can you maybe explain the concept of one unique and unified? Practically, I read this information. What does it give me? How can I use it for my development? That everything that you feel the Creator and only Him. Besides Him, you do not feel anything. Even in the measure to which appear different, contradicting actions and qualities, nonetheless, it all comes only from Him, from this one force, one thought. His thought, which is one unique and unified, comprehends absolutely all contradicting forces that appear in you precisely thanks to your qualities. Your qualities. And in the Creator, it all comes together, connects, unites into one whole. So this is something that you have to sense. The information that I just heard, it doesn't mean anything yet. You need to try and see it in yourself and around you. Further, Baal HaSulam explains that the spiritual essence in and of itself is simple, even though that it consists of many contradicting forms, in regard to the properties of the receiver, meaning all the good, all the bad. This is why people started believing there are two upper forces, which is one is good, the other is bad. Then they saw that there are many other forces, etc., etc. In short, in our world, a person lives, and around him there are many different forces, and he doesn't understand that it all stems from one source, from one force. So why? What does this source want to tell us by it? That we need to correct, so much so until we reach a state wherein everything will discover only him. And this the correction of man. Yes, to see behind all of these forces the one force. Yes, that there is none else besides him. Okay, so I see this one force, and then what? Then what? It means that you start correctly perceiving that which exists in you, around you, that it is all the one creator that fulfills, acts, initiates these actions, etc. So behind the still, the vegetative, the animate, etc., there's this one force that wishes for us to reveal it. Yes. So, Baal HaSulam writes, we should therefore always distinguish two discernments in his bestowal. The first is the form of the essence of that upper abundance before it is received, before it is clothed in man's perception, when it is still an inclusive simple light. The second is that after the abundance has been received, for by this it acquired one separate form according to the properties of the receiver. Yeah, meaning, according to the equivalence of form between my qualities and the actions of the Creator, I feel only this specific action by the Creator. So the light, before it's clothed in me, it's called one, unique, unified, etc. And when it is already clothed in the receiver, then it takes on my qualities. Yeah, and if my qualities are contradicting to him, then I feel myself in contradiction with the Creator. Well, there are many options here. It depends on the equivalence of form between the qualities of the Creator and the created being. This is how man feels it. So the more my qualities will be in equivalence of form with the qualities of the Creator, the more correctly I'll perceive him. Yes. The more clearly will you sense, feel him. Well, how clear is it, his perception? It depends on the measure of equivalence of form. Measure of equivalence of form. Everything that we sense is practically only the Creator. There is none else besides him. And therefore, all of our work comes down to revealing him in all of his manifestations. And then we'll see that it is all him, his one force and one fulfillment. At the end of this explanation, in our observation, Baal HaSulam writes that the soul is a part of God above, and it is not at all changed from the whole, except in that the soul is a part and not the whole. And then he gives an explanation that is like a stone that is carved from a mountain, and actually it's one and the same, only this is a part and that's the whole. Yes. And then the Ari himself asks, the Ari, Kabbalist from the 16th century, asks, what does it mean that the soul is a part of the Creator? Well, it's not a part of the Creator, but he who attains the Creator attains only a certain part. And actually, it is impossible to divide the Creator, carve a part off of him like a stone off a mountain. But the only thing that is possible is to understand that this is the way in which our attainment happens. What does Baal HaSulam want to explain to us here? That there's no difference between the soul that exists in a person and the Creator himself? No. No difference. The difference is in the attainment, that a person attains only a certain part, a certain manifestation of the Creator. But that's it. And the more he spiritually develops, the more he'll attain a greater and greater part of the Creator in him, until, as a result of his spiritual development, he will attain feeling how the Creator completely fulfills him in everything. On our level, how can we depict what the soul is? What's that organ inside of me, this quality? The soul is the quality of equivalence of form with the Creator. Meaning, if I will aspire to bestow, to give, to be kind, etc., etc., meaning all the qualities of the Creator, all of his qualities that I'm familiar with, I'll try to somehow express them towards others, then I will more and more feel myself coming closer to the Creator, up to the measure where I will start feeling him more and more clearly. So it means to try and reveal this inclination in me toward bestowal to others, yeah? And that in me will be called the soul, yeah? But why so? It's unclear. There's nothing else besides that. But again, love, connection, but that's the quality of the Creator. This is his manifestation in relation to us. And in us, there is the quality that is the opposite of the Creator. Was it impossible to invent anything else? I mean, why don't you like it? Because it's too far from you. It's the opposite of you. And precisely because of that, this is how it's created. So that from the oppositeness will you be able to attain the Creator. But why is it like in our world, suppose? If I want to take an example from someone or something, I see that example and I take it. I understand that it's written by those who attained it that the Creator, the quality of the Creator is bestowal and love. But I can't look at him and take such an example from him. Why is it hidden? It's not that it's hidden. You simply lack these qualities. And therefore, you yourself conceal the Creator from you. Okay, the Creator says you need to be good towards others. So I look at him, I look at the actions that he performs, because it says, from your actions do we know you. But where can I see his actions? You can't see his actions because these qualities do not exist in you. I understand. Okay, what for? In order for you to attain from the opposite, like we always say, that we can grasp what light is because there's darkness, sweet because there's sour, etc., etc. Meaning we attain him through the opposite qualities. So, one way or another, you need to believe that, not to believe, but to logically understand that if the Creator wishes for us to attain him, he needs initially to create in us qualities that are the opposite of him. Well, that's logical. That's okay. But I'm just saying that it's hard that there's no example. That's something completely different. There are examples, but only in the way in which Kabbalah explains that we need to start changing, and then we will attain these examples and reveal them. So this is how he concludes this part of the inner observation. We'll continue it on our further shows, and then we'll move on to questions and answers. So on our next lesson, I'd like to ask you, what's the common way to study tests? First of all, you study the text of the Ari, then the commentary by Baal HaSulam. First of all, Pnimi, inner light, then the inner observation, then you move on to the questions and answers. Yeah, to the words, to the explanation of the words, and then to questions and answers. But when we study the text, he has like these references. Do we need to go to those questions and answers, or to just study it separately? First time, you just study the text, the Pnimi, inner light. Yes, and when you already finished studying the inner light, Opnimi, then you can study the table of questions for the meaning of the words and the table of answers for the topics. So we'll simply go over the way Baal HaSulam presents it. Whatever you say, you're leading the show. No, I mean, what's the common way to study it? I don't think that beginners will have lots of patience to study questions and answers. Yeah, of course, I'll select chosen ones. Here too, I only take parts of the text. Right, because we need to work with what can interest people, first and foremost, to bring them closer to the wisdom of Kabbalah. And afterwards, to delve deeper into the text. This is something that you can do later. Okay? Thank you very much. All the best.